She bought the cabin that nobody wanted and saw something on a stormy night that no human being should ever see or be able to forget. Can you imagine the desperation of a widowed mother who agrees to live in a place where they say restless souls wander at night and where the last family vanished without a trace? What kind of situation pushes a woman with 2 small children onto a property that everyone in the village avoids as if it were cursed earth? This story actually happened in March of 1851, deep in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in a settlement called Blackwood Creek. Before I continue this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button down below, because what this widow saw in that cabin didn't just change her fate and that of her children. It revealed a secret that powerful families tried to bury for generations. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories from the old frontier are reaching. The morning of March 12th, 1851, dawned with a heavy sky, the color of molten lead, foreshadowing rain. Isabel Carter stood on the porch of the small cottage that had been her home for 12 years, watching 2 men load her meager belongings onto an old wagon. Everything that remained of a lifetime fit into 3 cloth bundles tied with twine and a cracked wooden crate. The smell of wet earth rose from the grounds of the Fairview estate, mixed with the strong scent of manure from the nearby corral. Isabel felt her stomach churn, though she didn't know if it was the smell or the icy fear that had gripped her chest for weeks. Her 2 children clung to the dark morning skirts she had worn since November. Michael, 9 years old, tried to look brave, but his brown eyes were wide with apprehension. Claire, only 6, sucked her thumb and hugged a rag doll against her chest, a toy so worn you could barely tell it had once been white. From the main veranda of the manor house, Dr. Henry Blackwood watched the scene with an expression as cold as marble. He was a thin man of no more than 30, dressed in clothes far too expensive for that dusty backwater, a silver-handled cane resting against his shoulder. He had inherited the estate from his uncle, Colonel Bentley, just 2 months prior, and one of the first decisions he made was to purge the property of all tenants and dependents who didn't produce a direct profit. Isabel was the foreman's widow. That meant she technically served no function there anymore. The new foreman Dr. Henry had hired was arriving the following week with his family. They would need the cottage. Isabel and the children would have to leave. Simple as that. Cold as that. Cruel as that. Isabel still remembered the conversation she'd had with the new master 3 weeks ago. He received her standing in his study, didn't even offer a chair, and explained the situation in a monotone voice, like someone reading a grocery list at the general store. "Isabel, the late John Carter was a good worker, I recognize that," he said without looking her in the eye. "But the reality is that this property needs to be managed efficiently. I cannot maintain residents who do not contribute to production. You have 2 months to make arrangements and vacate the premises," Isabel had pleaded. "Doctor, I can work," she said with a voice she tried to keep steady, but which betrayed her desperation. "I can wash, cook, sew, help in the garden. I just need a place to raise my children. They are small." Dr. Henry sighed with impatience, as if she were being difficult on purpose. "I do not run a charity house, Mrs. Carter," he replied. "My decision is made." It had been 2 months of nightmare. Isabel had some savings, money she and John had scraped together over years, coin by coin, dreaming of perhaps one day buying a small patch of land of their own. $18. That was all they had managed to save in 12 years of hard labor. It wasn't enough for almost anything. Isabel tried everything. She wrote a letter to her older sister who lived in Richmond, 3 days' journey away. The reply came 2 weeks later, brought by a wagoner. Her sister Marion explained with careful words that she would love to help, but her husband, a textile merchant, had made it clear he wouldn't accept dependents in the house. They had their own children to support, hard times, sincere but useless excuses. Isabel looked for work in the village. She offered herself as a washerwoman, a seamstress, a cook. But a widow with 2 small children wasn't exactly the type of employee families were looking for. Furthermore, the settlement of Blackwood Creek was small, opportunities were few, and most people could barely support their own families. She tried to rent a room at one of the boarding houses. The landlady of the Bellevue boarding house asked for 3 months' payment in advance. Isabel didn't have it. The owner of the Crossroads Inn didn't even want to talk when she saw the 2 children behind Isabel. Father Anthony, a kind man of 60 who ran the small village church, allowed Isabel and the children to sleep in the sacristy for 2 nights when the eviction deadline was looming. But even his generosity had limits. "My daughter, I wish I could do more," he said with genuine pity in his tired eyes. "But the church cannot become a permanent shelter. The congregation won't understand. I will pray for you. I will ask God to open a path." God opened a path, but it was a path that no one in their right mind would want to walk. It was Mrs. Higgins who told Isabel about the property. Higgins was a produce seller at the small village market, a widow too, a woman of about 65, with hands knotted from work and a heart still soft despite everything life had done to her. She saw Isabel wandering the square with the children on a morning of weak sunshine, the expression on Isabel's face that of a cornered animal, with no exit, no hope. Mrs. Higgins called Isabel over to her stall, offered a piece of corn cake to the children, and asked quietly what was happening. Isabel told her everything. Her voice broke in the middle, her hands trembled, but she told it. Higgins listened in silence, shaking her head, making little sounds of sympathy with her tongue. When Isabel finished, Higgins stayed quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Look, my child," she said finally with a hesitant voice, "there is a place where you could go. It's a property that's been for sale for years. No one wants to buy it. The price is next to nothing, about $20 for the land and the house. But there's a problem." Isabel felt a spark of hope light up in her chest. "What kind of problem, Mrs. Higgins?" The old woman made the sign of the cross before answering. "The place is haunted, child. Everyone knows it. The last family that lived there disappeared 20 years ago on a stormy night, vanished without a trace, as if the earth had swallowed them. Since then, anyone who tries to live there can't stay more than a few days. They say restless souls walk there, that there are noises at night, that the place is cursed." Isabel looked at Michael and Claire chewing on the corn cake with obvious hunger in their little eyes. She looked at the pale blue sky above the square. She looked back at Mrs. Higgins. "I can't be afraid of ghosts when I'm trying to keep my children from starving," she said, with a voice firmer than she felt. "Where is this place?" The property was located at the top of Lost Man's Ridge, nearly 3 miles from the village, accessible only by a narrow trail that snaked through dense woods. Mrs. Higgins gave directions on how to get to the solicitor's office where the clerk handled the sale. Isabel went there that same afternoon, heart beating fast, cold sweat running down her back, even though the day wasn't hot. The clerk was a middle-aged man named Sebastian Lowe, bald, round spectacles on a thin nose, an expression of permanent annoyance on his face. When Isabel mentioned an interest in the Lost Man's Ridge property, he looked up from the papers he was organizing and stared at her as if she had said something absurd. "Are you sure you want that property?" he asked, with the tone of someone who already knew the answer but had to ask anyway. Isabel nodded. "I am sure. I need a place to live with my children." The clerk took off his glasses, cleaned them with a handkerchief, put them back on, and sighed. "Ma'am, it is my legal duty to inform you that the property has a problematic history. Several people have attempted to reside there and all abandoned it in a short period of time. There are reports of inexplicable phenomena. I personally do not believe in superstitions, but you need to be aware." Isabel straightened her back. "How much is it?" $20, replied the clerk. But I see you are in a delicate situation. I accept $18 if you have the amount today. Isabel could barely believe it. It was exactly what she had saved, down to the last cent. It seemed like destiny. It seemed like God really had opened a path, even if it was a path covered in thorns and shadows. She signed the papers with a trembling hand. The clerk stamped it, registered it, handed over the deed. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter," he said without any enthusiasm. "The property is yours now. May God protect you there." Finding someone willing to take Isabel and the children up to the cabin was harder than buying the property. The village cart drivers refused, made excuses, said they were busy. Finally, a man named Jack, scrawny with yellowed eyes and the stench of moonshine on his breath, agreed to make the transport for double the normal price. $6. Isabel paid, feeling her savings evaporate like water in the hot sun. Jack came to pick her up at dawn the next day. He loaded the bundles and the crate onto the cart, pulled by a tired mule, helped the children up, then Isabel. He spoke almost nothing during the trip. He drove the mule along the dirt road, leaving the village, then turned onto the narrow trail that climbed the ridge. The woods began to swallow them. Centuries-old trees closed in over the trail, blocking the rising sun, creating a green and humid twilight. The smell of wet earth, of decaying vegetation, of moss. Strange sounds, birds Isabel didn't recognize, the rustling of dry leaves in a weak wind, the cracking of broken branches somewhere deep in the forest. Michael was silent, watching everything with big eyes. Claire was clinging to Isabel, her little face hidden in her mother's neck. The trail climbed, steeper and steeper. The mule snorted with effort. Jack whipped the animal, cursing softly. Finally, after almost an hour of climbing, the trail opened into a small clearing at the top of the ridge. And there stood the cabin. Isabel felt her heart sink. The building was of timber darkened by time and irregular stone, a roof of red colonial shingles with visible gaps where tiles had fallen. The main structure was perhaps 30 feet wide, 2 low stories, windows with wooden shutters that hung crooked on broken hinges. On the left side of the house was a smaller annex, a sort of barn or storage shed, in even worse condition. Around the property, tall weeds invaded everything, vines climbed the walls, enormous trees circled the clearing like somber sentinels. The silence was oppressive. Not even birds sang there. Just the wind moving the leaves with a constant disturbing whisper. Jack stopped the cart in front of the main door, jumped down quickly, and began unloading the bundles and the crate with obvious haste. Isabel got down from the cart, helped the children, took the rusty key the clerk had given her. Jack threw the last bundle on the ground, already climbing back onto the cart. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" he asked in a raspy voice. Isabel looked at the house, then at the children, then back at him. "I have no choice." Jack shook his head, whipped the mule, and the cart began to descend the trail, vanishing among the trees within minutes. And then Isabel and the children were alone. The front door groaned when Isabel pushed it. The sound echoed in the empty interior of the house like the moan of a living thing. The smell of mold hit her like a solid wall, so strong she coughed. Michael took a hesitant step inside. Claire refused to let go of her mother's skirt. The interior was covered in grey dust, as thick as snow. Enormous spiderwebs hung from the corners of the ceiling, swaying with the draught that entered through the open door. Furniture covered with grimy sheets occupied the main room, an old sofa, a table, chairs, a stone fireplace on one wall, cold ashes of a fire that must have been 20 years old. Floors of wide planks, stained and warped. Isabel walked slowly through the house, exploring. The main room led to a small kitchen with a rusty wood stove, empty shelves, a water pump she tried to work but found jammed. In the back, 2 tiny rooms with iron bed frames and no mattresses. A narrow staircase led to a low attic under the roof where there were likely more rooms, but Isabel didn't go up yet. Everything was abandoned, forgotten, as if time had stopped there 2 decades ago and no one had bothered to make it move again. Michael found a half-melted candle on the mantelpiece. "Mom, look," he said, holding the object as if it were treasure. "We'll need candles when it gets dark." Isabel agreed, trying to appear calmer than she was. "Let's clean what we can before nightfall. We need at least a place to sleep." They spent the rest of the day working. Isabel opened every window that would still open, letting fresh air in to push the moldy smell out. She swept the thick dust from the floor with an old broom she found leaning in a corner. Michael helped remove the cloths from the furniture, revealing deteriorated but still usable pieces. Claire, finally letting go of her mother a little, gathered dry twigs in the yard to make a fire. When the sun began to dip behind the trees, dyeing the sky orange and purple, Isabel managed to light a fire in the hearth. The flames crackled alive, illuminating the room with dancing golden light, pushing some of the shadows into the corners. She improvised beds on the floor, with the cloth she'd taken off the furniture, prepared a miserable dinner of cornmeal mixed with water and a bit of hard molasses candy left over from the boarding house. The children ate in silence. Michael was too tired to pretend it was an adventure. Claire had red eyes from crying, but no tears left. They lay on the cloths on the floor near the fireplace, huddled together like frightened animals. Isabel sat awake, back against the wall, clutching a rusty kitchen knife she'd found in a drawer. Night fell completely outside, absolute darkness with no moon, only faint stars between the treetops. The sounds of the woods grew louder, owls hooting, some large animal breaking branches in the distance, wind moaning in the loose shutters. Isabel prayed. She didn't quite know what to ask for anymore, just repeated Hail Marys mechanically, hoping God was listening, hoping she had made the right choice, hoping the ghosts of the legend were just that. Legend. She finally fell asleep near midnight, a heavy sleep of exhaustion. The first days in the cabin were hard but bearable. Isabel woke with the rising sun, lit the fire, improvised weak coffee with the beans she'd managed to buy before leaving the village. She and the children cleaned more parts of the house, made small repairs with the limited resources they had. Michael found rusty tools in the barn, a hammer, bent nails, a broken saw, and helped his mother seal cracks in the walls with mud and straw. Claire swept, organized, started to talk a little more. Isabel discovered the water pump could work if worked with enough force. She pumped until her arms ached, getting brown water that needed to settle in a bucket until the dirt sank to the bottom. There was a small creek 200 yards away, down the trail, where the water was cleaner. She walked there twice a day with a bucket, Michael helping to carry. On the 5th day, Isabel went to the village to buy supplies with the few coins remaining. The walk of nearly 2 hours each way was tiring but necessary. At the general store, the clerk, a skinny young man with a thin mustache named Paul, served her with cold politeness. When Isabel mentioned she was living in the cabin on Lost Man's Ridge, he quickly made the sign of the cross, looking at her as if she had just said she lived in hell. People in the street moved away when Isabel passed. They whispered behind her. An old lady spat on the ground and muttered something about recklessness and children in danger. Isabel bought flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, salt, candles. She returned to the cabin, feeling a weight on her soul heavier than the groceries in her sack. On the evening of that 5th day, Michael was playing near the barn even though Isabel had told him not to go there. A curious 9-year-old boy, he wanted to explore everything. He was jumping between loose floorboards in the barn when one of them snapped under his weight and he fell. Isabel heard the scream and ran, heart racing with panic. "Michael, Michael, where are you?" "I'm here, Mom." His voice came from the barn, scared but not in pain. I fell in a hole! Isabel ran into the barn, finding Michael sitting in a shallow pit where the board had broken, looking up with a frightened expression but unharmed. Are you hurt? She asked, already kneeling beside him, hands checking arms and legs. No, Mom, I'm okay. The board was rotten. Isabel helped him out of the hole, then looked down with more attention. It was a strange hole. There should have been dirt underneath. But when she knocked on the board next to it, the sound was hollow, an echo of empty space. Curiosity awoke inside her, mixed with apprehension. She tested the other boards around it, discovered that an entire section of the barn floor was false. Carefully, she removed some loose planks. Beneath, in the gloom, she saw stone steps descending into complete darkness, a staircase leading underground. Isabel stared at it for a full minute, mind racing. What was down there? Why was it hidden? Was it part of the inexplicable phenomena people talked about? She felt an icy fear climb her spine, but she also felt something else, intense curiosity, almost morbid. But it was getting dark. The children needed her. This was not the moment to explore unknown underground spaces. Isabel put the boards back in place carefully, covered the area with loose straw. You don't come back here alone, do you hear me, Michael? She said with a firm voice. It's dangerous. You could have been hurt badly. Michael nodded, still shaken by the fall. But Isabel couldn't stop thinking. During dinner, while putting the children to sleep, while staying awake watching the fire die in the hearth, her mind went back to those stone stairs. What was down there? And why did something inside her, instinct or premonition, say that it was important? In the following days, Isabel tried to establish a normal routine. Wake up, cook, clean, small maintenance jobs on the house. But the stairs under the barn called to her like a voice, whispering in the back of her mind. She resisted. She was afraid. Afraid of finding something terrible, afraid of confirming that the place really held dark secrets. It was on the 10th day that everything changed. The day of March 22nd began with a cloudy sky, the air heavy with humidity. During the afternoon, the clouds became darker, denser, the color of wet charcoal. The wind began to blow hard, moving the trees in waves, tearing off dry leaves and throwing them against the house. Isabel recognized the signs, a strong storm coming. She closed the windows, locked the doors, lit extra candles, prepared the children. We're going to have a storm tonight, she said to Michael and Claire. Don't be afraid. The house has weathered many storms. It will protect us from this one too. The rain began at nightfall, first fat-spaced drops hitting the roof, then increasing to a violent torrent. Wind howled around the house, making the structure groan and creak. Thunder began, distant at first, then closer and closer, bombs of sound that shook the walls. Lightning illuminated the interior of the house through the cracks in the shutters, intense white flashes that lasted a fraction of a second and left ghostly spots in their vision. Michael and Claire were terrified. Claire screamed when a particularly loud thunderclap seemed to explode right on top of the house. Isabel hugged both children, trying to calm them, humming softly, saying everything was fine, that it was just noise, that it would pass. But she herself was tense. Something about the storm felt different, more intense, more alive, as if it had a will of its own, a purpose. Around 10 o'clock at night, the storm reached a peak of fury. Rain hammered the roof with the force of thrown stones. Wind screamed like a dying animal. Lightning struck so close that Isabel could smell the ozone in the air, that electric and metallic scent that comes before thunder. That was when the shutter of the living room window began to bang violently, bam, 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 against the outer wall. Isabel tried to ignore it, but the noise was unbearable. It was scaring the children even more. She needed to close it. I'm just going to close the window, she said to Michael and Claire. Stay here near the fire. I'll be right back. She crossed the room to the window, reached for the shutter latch through the pane, blurred by the rain beating on the other side. And that was when she saw it. Outside, between the house and the barn, in the middle of the torrential rain and darkness, there were figures, glowing figures. Isabel froze, with her hands on the window frame, breath caught in her throat, heart stopping. The figures shone with a ghostly greenish light, translucent as if made of illuminated mist. They were in a line, perhaps 8 or 10, walking slowly in a silent procession. They carried something that glowed intensely between them, impossible to distinguish what it was through the rain and foggy glass, but it pulsed with its own light. Lightning struck, illuminating everything in a blinding white flash, and in that second of total light, Isabel saw details that burned into her mind. The figures looked like people, had human shape, but torn clothes. Some seemed chained. Expressions on blurred faces were of suffering, of ancient pain. The procession moved from the barn toward the woods, gliding over the muddy ground without leaving footprints, without making a sound Isabel could hear above the roar of the storm. Another lightning bolt fell, and another, creating a terrifying strobe effect, freezing the movement of the figures in fragmented frames, here, then there, then further away, as if they were jumping between the flashes. Isabel couldn't move. She was trapped there, hands frozen on the window frame, wide eyes fixed on the impossible vision. Her mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that she was seeing things, that it was a trick of the light and rain. But she saw. She saw with terrible clarity. She saw every detail. The last figure in the procession turned its head. Isabel swore it turned and looked directly at her. It had no eyes, just dark hollows where eyes should be. But Isabel felt the weight of that gaze like a cold hand squeezing her heart. Then the procession disappeared among the trees, the greenish light swallowed by the darkness and the rain, as if it had never existed. Isabel stood still for a time impossible to measure. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. Finally, trembling violently, she managed to let go of the window frame, managed to take a step back. "Mom?" Michael's voice behind her made her almost scream. "Mom, did you see it too?" Isabel turned too fast, almost fell, held onto the edge of the table. "See what?" she asked with a hoarse voice that didn't sound like hers. "The lights outside," said Michael with big eyes. "There were lights walking. Were they ghosts?" So Michael had seen it too. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't madness. Isabel pulled Michael close, hugged him and Claire tightly, feeling the two small bodies trembling against hers. "No, they weren't ghosts," she lied with a voice she tried to make sound convincing. "It was just lightning reflecting in the rain, a trick of the eyes, it's nothing." But Claire cried softly, and Michael didn't seem to believe it. Isabel didn't sleep that night. She sat awake with the knife in her hands, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the window, waiting for the figures to return. But they didn't return. The storm tapered off in the hours before dawn, rain turning from a torrent to a drizzle, then stopping completely. When the first rays of weak sun began to appear between the retreating clouds, Isabel finally allowed herself to relax a little. By daylight, she needed to know. She needed to see if they had left any sign. As soon as the children woke up and she served a quick breakfast, Isabel went out to inspect the grounds. The ground was muddy from the night's rain, enormous puddles between the house and the barn. She walked slowly to where she had seen the procession, eyes searching for footprints, marks, anything. There was nothing, just virgin mud, leaves fallen from the storm, broken branches, no footprints, no sign that anything or anyone had walked there. Isabel looked toward the woods, where the figures had disappeared. The trees looked normal in the daylight, just wet, dripping residual water. But she knew what she had seen. She was absolutely certain. She stood there in the middle of the muddy yard, light rain still falling on her clothes and hair, staring at the forest. Thoughts raced through her head, too fast to organize. Had she seen real restless souls? Was it an illusion caused by the storm? Was it related to the stairs under the barn? What did the dead want to show her? And more importantly, should she flee this place with the children before something worse happened, or should she discover the truth? Isabel went back inside the house, closed the door, leaned against it. Michael and Claire watched her with worried expressions. "Mum, are we leaving here?" asked Michael with a small voice. Isabel looked at her children, at the house she had bought with everything she owned, at the miserable life that awaited them if they fled now with nowhere to go. "No," she said finally, "we aren't leaving, but we are going to find out what is happening here. And when we know the truth, we will decide what to do." She walked to the window and looked one more time in the direction where the ghostly procession had vanished into the woods. She felt in the depths of her soul, with a cold and absolute certainty, that she would have to enter that forest and discover the secret. Because now it wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about knowing if what she had seen could somehow save her children, or if it would destroy the little they had left. 3 days passed since the night of the storm and the terrifying vision. 3 days where Isabel barely managed to sleep, where every sound of the woods made her jump, where her eyes compulsively returned to the direction of the forest where the glowing figures had disappeared. The routine continued because it had to continue. Isabel woke with the sunrise, lit the fire in the hearth with twigs and wood Michael helped gather, prepared weak coffee, cooked cornmeal mixed with water which they ate with a bit of hard molasses candy when they had it. She and the children did small jobs around the house, fixing what they could with limited resources, trying to turn that abandoned place into something that felt like a home. But Isabel's mind was trapped in that vision. She relived every detail obsessively, the translucent figures glowing with ghostly green light, the silent procession carrying something luminous, the expressions of suffering on blurred faces, the final look of that last figure without eyes, but who still seemed to see Isabel with an intensity that burned the soul. Michael was different too. The boy stayed too quiet, looked at the woods with a worried expression, slept poorly, and woke up with nightmares he didn't want to tell. Claire went back to sucking her thumb constantly and refused to leave her mother's side, not even to play in the yard for a few minutes. The house seemed to have changed since that night. Or perhaps it was just Isabel's perception, but the sounds seemed louder, the shadows darker, the silence more oppressive. At night, Isabel lay awake, listening to every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the wind in the shutters, every snap in the old structure of the house, heart racing at every noise, expecting the glowing figures to appear again. But they didn't appear. 3 nights passed with nothing but the normal sounds of the woods and the wind. This should have calmed Isabel, but in truth it worsened the tension, because she knew she had seen something real. Michael had seen it too. And if it was real, then it meant there was an explanation, there was a cause, there was something on that property that needed to be discovered. The stairs under the barn called to Isabel constantly, like a voice whispering in the back of her mind. She knew she needed to go down there, explore what was underneath, discover if there was a connection between that underground space and the glowing figures. But fear paralyzed her, fear of what she might find, fear of confirming that the place was truly cursed, fear of putting the children in even greater danger. It was on the morning of the 4th day after the storm, March 26th, that everything began to change. Isabel was trying to fix the roof where some shingles had fallen during the storm. She had no money to hire anyone, so she tried to do it alone, balanced on a precarious ladder leaning against the wall, hands shaking while trying to put heavy shingles back in place. It was dangerous work she didn't know how to do properly, but she had no choice. That was when she heard the sound of footsteps on the trail leading to the cabin. Isabel scrambled down the ladder quickly, heart accelerating with sudden fear. Who would be coming up here? No one from the village visited this place. People avoided Lost Man's Ridge as if it were contaminated land. A man emerged from the trees, walking with a firm stride along the muddy trail. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, carrying a wooden toolbox and rolls of something that looked like construction materials. He wore simple work clothes, worn canvas trousers, a cotton shirt with sleeves rolled up revealing muscular, tanned arms, a straw hat protecting his face from the sun. When he got closer, Isabel could see better. A man of about 40, angular face with a thick greying beard, clear eyes that seemed to carry ancient sadness, a serious but not threatening expression. "Good morning," he said with a deep, measured voice as he neared the house. "Are you Isabel Carter?" Isabel was tense, ready to run if necessary, but something about the man's calm posture made her answer. "I am. Who are you?" "My name is Vincent Moore. I'm a carpenter. Father Anthony sought me out yesterday, saying you needed help with repairs on the house. He asked me to come take a look." Isabel felt a wave of surprise and gratitude. Father Anthony had thought of her, had sent help even without her asking. But soon gratitude was replaced by practical worry. "Mr. Vincent, I appreciate it very much, but I have no way to pay for service right now. I have very limited resources." Vincent placed the toolbox on the ground and looked at the house with a professional gaze, assessing the condition. "The father already paid for the basic materials," he said, without looking at Isabel. "As for my work, we can arrange payment later, when you are able. Or you can pay with food. I'm not a man to let a widow with children live under a roof that might fall on their heads." The simplicity and kindness of those words made Isabel's eyes sting with tears. She blinked rapidly to clear away. "Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent," she said with a choked voice. "You don't know how much this means." Vincent just nodded, picked the toolbox back up and walked around the house, looking at the roof, testing the walls, evaluating the necessary work. Isabel followed him at a respectful distance, answering his questions about the state of the house, showing the places where rain came in, where the floorboards were rotten, where the windows didn't close right. "There's quite a bit of work here," said Vincent, after completing the inspection, "but nothing that can't be fixed. I'll start with the roof, because it's the most urgent. If it rains again with those gaps, it'll ruin the whole interior." Isabel agreed, feeling for the first time in weeks a small hope that things could get better. Vincent worked all day. He was a man of few words, focused on the job, but Isabel noticed the precision of his movements, his skill with the tools, his patience in doing each repair the right way. Michael was fascinated, watching the carpenter work, asking occasional questions that Vincent answered with surprising patience. Even Claire came out of her shell a little, sitting on the doorstep with her doll in her lap, watching the big man work on the roof. At noon, Isabel served a simple lunch of beans with flour and fried salt pork. Vincent accepted with discreet thanks, ate in silence, returned the plate with a quiet "thank you." Then he went back to work. It was during the afternoon, when the sun was already dipping and Vincent was coming down from the roof to get more nails from the toolbox, that he made the comment that would change everything. "You seem very tense, Mom," he said while organizing the tools. "Haven't slept well in days." Isabel, who was bringing fresh water from the creek, almost dropped the bucket. How had he noticed? She thought she was hiding the fatigue, the constant fear. "Well, It's been hard adapting to the place," she replied cautiously. "The children aren't sleeping well either." Vincent looked at her with those clear eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "I imagine you've already heard the stories about this property." Isabel nodded slowly. "I have. Mrs. Higgins told me everything before I bought it." Vincent wiped his hands on a rag, put the hammer in the box. "And do you believe in these stories?" Isabel hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, that they were just foolish superstitions, but another part, the part that had seen the ghostly procession 3 nights ago, couldn't lie completely. "Do you believe in restless souls, sir?" she asked, instead of answering. Vincent stayed quiet for a moment, thinking. I believe there are things in this world we don't completely understand, he said finally with a measured voice. I've seen things I can't explain. But I also believe most terrors have an explanation that isn't supernatural. Sometimes it's just the human mind seeing patterns where none exist, turning shadows into monsters. Sometimes it's a natural phenomenon that seems impossible because we don't know the cause. His words were rational, logical, but spoken with respect, without mockery. Isabel felt something relax in her chest. Here was someone who wasn't going to laugh at her situation, wasn't going to judge, wasn't going to think she was crazy. And have you heard about what happened here specifically? She asked, taking a step closer. The stories about the family that disappeared, about the people who tried to live here and fled terrified? Vincent nodded. I heard, yes. Lived in the village all my life, I know the stories. But I also know human nature. Sometimes people prefer to believe in curses than admit they simply couldn't handle living in an isolated, decaying place. Loneliness and fear are powerful things. They can play tricks on the mind. Isabel wanted to believe that. Wanted desperately to believe everything had a rational explanation. But she had seen those figures, had seen them with terrible clarity. Maybe you're right, she said without much conviction. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring something. If you want to talk about what's scaring you and the children, I'll listen without judgment. Sometimes speaking about fear lessens its power. But Isabel wasn't ready to tell yet. She was ashamed, afraid that even this apparently understanding man would think she was losing her mind. Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Maybe later. Vincent just nodded and went back to work. He returned in the following days. Each morning arriving with the sun still low, working on the roof, then the windows, then repairs to the walls. He brought materials Father Anthony provided, but also brought his own materials, which he said were leftovers from other jobs. Though Isabel suspected he was paying out of his own pocket and not admitting it. Vincent's presence on the property changed the atmosphere of the place. With him there, Isabel felt less vulnerable, less exposed. The children were calmer. Michael followed Vincent everywhere, helping to hold nails, carry boards, absorbing every word the carpenter said about the work. Claire began to smile occasionally, especially when Vincent, in a pause, fixed her rag doll with a needle and thread he took from his toolbox, sewing the arm that was coming loose with surprising care for such large hands. It was on Vincent's 6th day of work, April 1st, that Isabel finally made the decision. The previous night had been particularly difficult. Isabel dreamed of the luminous procession, but in the dream, the figures didn't walk away. They walked closer, entered the house, approached the bed where she lay, and when the first figure extended a translucent hand to touch her face, Isabel woke up screaming, cold sweat soaking her clothes. The children woke up scared. Isabel needed half an hour to calm them and herself. She stayed awake the rest of the night, deciding she couldn't continue like this. She needed to know the truth. She needed to explore that space under the barn and discover what was really happening, but she wasn't going to do it alone. She would need help. And Vincent was the only person she could trust. In the afternoon of that day, when Vincent was finishing fixing the last window that wouldn't close, Isabel called him. "Mr. Vincent, I need to speak with you about something important." He came down from the ladder, wiped his hands, looked at her with an attentive expression. "Go ahead." Isabel took a deep breath. "Michael discovered something in the barn a few days ago. A hidden entrance under a false floor. There are stone stairs going down underground. I don't know where it leads. I haven't explored it yet. But I think it might be related to the stories of this place." Vincent didn't seem particularly surprised. "Underground entrance? Probably an old cellar or maybe a tunnel. This region had a lot of mining back in the day. Wouldn't be strange to have excavations. Do you want me to look? Isabel nodded. But there's more. On the night of the storm a week ago, I saw... She hesitated, not knowing how to continue without sounding completely insane. I saw things outside. Glowing figures. They looked like people, but they shone. They were translucent. They were in a procession, carrying something, going from the barn toward the woods. Michael saw part of it too. It wasn't imagination, Mr. Vincent. It was real. Vincent stayed quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Isabel expected to see doubt, maybe pity, maybe fear, but he just asked with a calm voice, was it a stormy night with lots of lightning? Isabel blinked, surprised by the question. It was, yes. Why? Because light behaves in strange ways during intense electrical storms, explained Vincent. Reflections, refractions, phosphorescence in certain types of stone or mineral. If there's a cave or tunnel under this property, and if the walls have certain minerals, it's possible lightning creates very strange optical effects. I've heard cases of people seeing ghostly lights near old mines during storms. There's always a natural explanation. Isabel felt a wave of relief so strong her legs trembled. So you don't think I'm crazy, or that the place is actually haunted? Vincent shook his head. I think you saw something real, but real doesn't mean supernatural. Let's go down into that entrance and investigate. If it's what I'm thinking, we'll find an answer. They waited until the children were asleep that night. Isabel didn't want Michael and Claire near that exploration until she knew what was down there. Vincent had gone back to the village during the afternoon to get better lanterns and enough oil. He returned at dusk, and after a simple dinner, when the stars were already shining in the moonless sky, they went to the barn. Isabel held a lantern with a trembling hand. Vincent carried another lantern and also a large hammer, just in case. They entered the barn, and Isabel showed the section of the floor where the hidden entrance was. Vincent knelt, removed the boards Isabel had put back, revealing the stone stairs descending into darkness. I'll go down first, he said. Stay up here until I see if it's safe. Isabel wanted to protest but knew it made sense. Vincent descended the stone steps slowly, lantern illuminating the way. Isabel watched him disappear into the darkness, only the glow of his lantern visible, going deeper and deeper. Then his voice came up. It's safe. You can come down, slowly. Isabel descended, each step careful on the damp and irregular stone. The air got colder as she went down, the smell of earth and dampness increasing. Finally, she reached the bottom, where Vincent was waiting. They were in an underground corridor. The walls were of hewn stone, a low arched ceiling, approximately 5'7" in height, making Vincent need to lower his head slightly. The corridor stretched in a straight line for perhaps 20 yards, before disappearing into the darkness beyond the reach of the lantern light. This is a mining tunnel, said Vincent with a professional voice, analyzing the walls. Look at the tool marks on the stone. Was dug by hand probably over 100 years ago. Must have been part of an operation searching for gold or precious stones. Isabel looked around with fear mixed with fascination. Shall we explore? Vincent nodded. Let's go. But stay close to me, and if anything looks unstable, we turn back immediately. They walked down the corridor, the lanterns creating circles of golden light that danced on the damp walls. The silence was absolute, oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and breathing. Isabel felt the weight of the earth above her head, the sensation of being swallowed by the underground world. The corridor forked. Vincent chose the path to the right, which descended a little. After another 10 yards, the tunnel ended in a small chamber, empty except for stone rubble on the floor. They went back, took the path to the left of the fork. This tunnel was longer, curving after about 15 yards, and that was when Vincent stopped abruptly, lifting the lantern to see the walls better. Isabel, look at this. The walls of the tunnel in this section had marks. Not just excavation tool marks, but deliberate symbols scratched into the stone. Simple crosses, arrows pointing in different directions, letters and numbers, M17, L23, P8, S42, and a strange symbol that appeared several times, a triangle with a circle inside. "What are these marks?" asked Isabel, touching one of the crosses with hesitant fingers. Vincent brought the lantern closer, studying the symbols. "This isn't common mining. Look like markings of—" He hesitated, thinking. "Of a route, like signs for people using this tunnel to know where to go. The numbers might be codes, or dates, or head counts. This symbol with the triangle and circle, I've seen similar in research I did once about symbols of secret societies or clandestine networks." "Clandestine networks of what?" asked Isabel, though something in the back of her mind was already starting to suspect. Vincent looked at her. In the time of the gold rushes, and even after, there were smuggling networks, moving people, fugitive slaves, for example. There were people who helped slaves escape, hid them, moved them from place to place using secret routes. It was extremely dangerous, punishable by death in some cases, but there were those who did it anyway. Isabel's heart began to beat faster. Fugitive slaves passed through here? Under this house? Vincent didn't answer immediately, continued walking down the tunnel, following the marks. After another 20 yards or so, the tunnel ended in a larger chamber, perhaps 12 feet square. And in the center of the chamber, illuminated by the flickering light of the lanterns, was a wooden chest. Isabel let out a low exclamation. Vincent approached the chest slowly, knelt, examined without touching. The wood was dark with age and dampness, iron bolts completely rusted. "This has been here a long time," he said. "Decades, probably." Isabel knelt beside him. "Can you open it?" Vincent tried the latches. They resisted for a moment, then gave way with a loud screech of metal against metal that echoed through the chamber, making Isabel jump. Vincent lifted the lid of the chest slowly. Inside, the first thing visible were bags of rotten cloth. Vincent opened one carefully, and gold coins spilled into his hand, shining intensely in the lantern light. "My God," whispered Isabel. Vincent opened another bag, then another. More coins, simple jewelry, small bars of melted gold. "There's enough wealth here to keep a person comfortable for years," said Vincent with a low, almost reverent voice. "But look underneath." He moved the bags of gold, revealing the bottom layer of the chest. A leather-bound book, a bundle of yellowed letters tied with twine that was falling apart, folded maps, loose papers. Vincent picked up the book carefully, opened to the first page. Isabel moved her lantern closer to light it better. She could see elegant but old handwriting, brown ink faded but still legible. "Registry of the Freed," read Vincent aloud. "Route of St. Sebastian, begun in the year of our Lord, 1795, by Father Stephen, and continued by the Brotherhood of Liberty." He looked at Isabel with a shocked expression. "This is a record of an abolitionist network. A network that operated here, passing through this property for over 30 years. Isabel could barely breathe. "This means fugitive slaves were hidden here, helped to escape." Vincent turned pages delicately, reading excerpts aloud. "Entry of April 3, 1802. Maria, 16 years old, fled after threat of being sold separate from children, safe passage granted, taken to Green Valley Community, freed." Another entry of December 12, 1815. "Jack, 45 years old, fled after witnessing murder of brother by cruel overseer, safe passage granted, taken to Ohio with free man papers provided by brother Sebastian, freed." Page after page, name after name, story after story, hundreds of people over decades, all helped by this secret network. Vincent continued turning pages, finding route descriptions, names of collaborators, methods used to fool slave catchers, locations of hideouts along the way. And then he reached the last entries. The handwriting was different, more hurried. Date of August 10th, 1830. Last passage realized. Situation becoming dangerous. Local merchant Tate suspects activities. Sent men to watch property. Decision made. End operation. Seal tunnels. May God protect those who will continue the work elsewhere. Signed, Gaspar Perry. Perry, whispered Isabel. That was the name of the family that disappeared. Vincent nodded slowly, understanding forming. They didn't disappear mysteriously. They fled strategically, left everything behind, spread the story of supernatural disappearance to protect the secret of the tunnels, and left to continue the work somewhere else. The whole legend of haunting was invented on purpose. Isabel sat on the cold floor of the chamber, mind racing. And the glowing figures I saw? Vincent stayed quiet for a moment, thinking, then lifted the lantern to examine the walls of the chamber with more attention. Isabel, look at the walls. She looked. At first it seemed just irregular dark stone. But when the lantern light hit at a certain angle, something sparkled. Small crystals embedded in the stone, reflecting the light with a faint greenish shine. Quartz, said Vincent. The walls of this chamber are full of quartz veins. During an intense electrical storm, if there are cracks in the walls that allow outside light to enter, the crystals can refract and reflect that light in an extremely complex way. With multiple crystals creating reflections and counter-reflections, it could create an illusion of luminous figures, especially if seen through rain and foggy glass. He walked around the chamber, examining. Look here, he said, pointing to a narrow crack in the wall near the ceiling. This crack probably leads up to the surface, maybe opens near the barn or at the base of some tree. During a storm with constant lightning, light entering through here would be amplified by the crystals. And with the right angle, the reflections could project outwards too, creating an effect of moving lights. Isabel tried to process this. So they weren't ghosts, they were reflections. Vincent nodded. Rare natural phenomenon, but perfectly explainable. The builders of these tunnels probably discovered this effect by accident during some storm and realized they could use it to protect the place. They created the legend of restless souls, maybe even enhanced the effect by positioning additional crystals strategically to scare away anyone who tried to investigate too much. The explanation was rational, scientific. Isabel should feel relief, and she did, in part. But she also felt something else. Deep sadness for the stories contained in that book, immense respect for the people who risked everything to help others, and crushing weight of the responsibility that had just fallen on her. Mr. Vincent, what should I do with this? She asked, looking at the chest of gold and documents. Vincent closed the book carefully, put it back in the chest. That is a decision only you can make. But I will say one thing. This gold has a history of blood and redemption. It was given by people who believed in freedom. It was kept here by people who risked their lives for what was right. Using it only for personal benefit would be... He hesitated, choosing words. It would be wasting their sacrifice. But I also need to think of my children, said Isabel with a broken voice. I need to ensure they have food, clothes, a future. I can't simply ignore that I have here what could save us from misery. Vincent looked at her with understanding. And I'm not saying you should ignore it. I'm saying maybe they aren't opposing things. Maybe you can do both. Care for your family and honor the history of this place. Isabel didn't answer. She didn't know how that would be possible yet. They closed the chest, left everything as it was, climbed back to the surface. The night was clear, stars bright above, air fresh and clean after the earthy smell of the tunnel. Isabel took a deep breath, trying to organize thoughts. Don't tell anyone about this yet, she asked Vincent. I need to think, decide what to do. Vincent agreed. This is your secret. I'm only going to ask one thing. If you decide to do something with this discovery, consult me first. because this kind of secret can attract dangerous people. In the following days, Isabel lived in a state of constant mental confusion. During the day, she tried to maintain a normal routine, care for the children, do chores around the house. Vincent kept coming to make repairs, now more relaxed, talking more, telling stories of his own life to Michael, who listened fascinated. Isabel discovered Vincent had been a widower for 3 years, that his wife had died in childbirth, along with the baby that would have been their first child, that he had lived alone since then, working obsessively not to think about the loss. "I understand why you are so kind to widows and orphans," Isabel said one afternoon. "You know the pain of losing someone you love." Vincent nodded with sadness in his eyes. "I do. And I know that being unable to protect who you love is worse than dying." The conversations between them grew longer, deeper. There was a growing connection, a mutual recognition of shared pain, shared loneliness. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was the beginning of something: genuine trust, mutual respect, the possibility that perhaps neither Isabel nor Vincent needed to be alone forever. But meanwhile, Isabel had to make a decision about the gold and documents. At night, after the children slept, she went down alone to the tunnels, took the registry book upstairs, read by candlelight for hours. The stories were moving, terrible, inspiring. Each name represented a real life, real suffering, real courage. And then, on the 10th day after the discovery of the tunnels, April 11th, Isabel made the mistake that would change everything. She had decided to do a small test. She took a single gold coin from the chest, hid it in the hem of her skirt, walked to a neighboring village 8 miles away where no one knew her well. She found a goldsmith who worked in a small shop near the church. She entered with heart beating fast, asked to sell the coin. The goldsmith, a thin man with thick glasses named Bernard, examined the coin with increasing interest. "This is an old piece," he said with a nasal voice. "Very old. Where did you get this?" "It's family inheritance," lied Isabel. "My grandfather left some coins saved. Now I need the money." The goldsmith weighed the coin, tested authenticity, offered a fair price. Isabel accepted, pocketed the money, and left quickly. She used the money to buy enough food for 2 weeks, new clothes for the children who were in rags, materials to fix the house. She felt immense relief not to be hungry, to be able to give better conditions to Michael and Claire. She thought she had been discreet, careful, but she wasn't careful enough. The goldsmith Bernard, on a visit to the village of Blackwood Creek 3 days later to deliver an order for another client, casually met a merchant named Roderick Tate at the general store. Tate was a man who knew everyone, heard all the gossip, kept tabs on everything that happened in the region. During casual conversation, Bernard mentioned the widow who had sold an antique gold coin. Tate, a fat man of 45 with a gold chain across his vest and small eyes narrowed with permanent greed, asked with too casual interest, "What widow?" Bernard described Isabel. Young woman, dressed in mourning with local accent, said she lived nearby. Roderick Tate knew only one recent widow living nearby, the woman who had bought the Lost Man's Ridge property against every warning from sensible people. His brain began to work immediately. Miserable widow with no resources suddenly appears selling antique gold. She had found something on that cursed property, the property that Roderick's grandfather always said hid wealth. The property Roderick had tried to buy several times, but the stubborn clerk always refused to sell to him. The property that now belonged to a defenseless widow. Roderick went immediately to the clerk's office, tried to discover details about the property sale. The clerk, Sebastian Lowe, was too honest to reveal confidential information, but Roderick had ways to find out what he wanted. A bribe to the junior clerk guaranteed a copy of the deed and confirmation that Isabel had paid only $18 for the property. So she didn't have resources, thought Roderick, but now she has gold to sell, means she found something there. And if there's one coin, there's more, maybe much more. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and share with someone who needs to believe in second chances and the strength of those who don't give up. Roderick Tate was not a patient man when it came to money. The next afternoon, he sent an employee from the warehouse, a young man named Augustus, to go up to the cabin on Lost Man's Ridge with a purchase offer. Augustus was a man of 35, thin but strong, with a scar crossing the left side of his face from an old fight, a reputation for doing dirty work for Roderick when necessary. He climbed the trail to the cabin on a hot April afternoon, found Isabel in the yard hanging washed clothes. "Mrs. Isabel Carter?" he asked with a harsh voice that tried to sound polite but couldn't hide natural rudeness. Isabel turned, saw a strange man standing there, felt immediate fear. "That's me." "Who are you?" "My name is Augustus. I work for Mr. Roderick Tate, owner of the main store in the village. He sent me with a proposal." Isabel's heart sank. She had a terrible feeling about this. "What proposal?" Augustus took an envelope from his pocket, offered it to Isabel. "Mr. Tate would like to buy your property. He is offering $50. It is more than you paid. Good deal." Isabel didn't even need to open the envelope. "I am not interested in selling," she said, with a voice firmer than she felt. "I just got established here. It is my home now." Augustus didn't seem surprised by the refusal. "Mr. Tate imagined you would say that, but he asked me to mention something. This is a very isolated property. A lady alone with 2 children. It isn't safe. Bad things can happen in isolated places. No one would hear screams." The veiled threat was clear. Isabel felt anger burn in her chest, pushing some of the fear aside. "Are you threatening me?" Augustus shrugged. "I am just observing facts. You should consider the offer carefully. I will return in 3 days to hear the final answer." He turned and went down the trail before Isabel could answer. Isabel ran inside the house, locked the door, leaned against it, trembling. This was a disaster. Roderick Tate had discovered or suspected the gold. And he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. She needed help. When Vincent arrived the next morning to continue work on the house, Isabel told him everything about selling the coin, about Augustus's visit, about the threat. Vincent listened with an expression getting darker and darker. "Tate is a dangerous man," he said when Isabel finished. "Has no scruples. If he wants something, he will do whatever is necessary to get it. And if he discovers it's not just a coin, but a whole chest of gold, he will get much more aggressive." Isabel was on the verge of panic. "What do I do? I can't sell the property. I have nowhere to go. But I also can't put my children in danger." Vincent stayed thinking for a long moment. "We need time to find a better solution. For now, I will stay here at night keeping watch. If Tate sends men to try something, they will find me. I'm not a fighter, but I'm also not a man who intimidates easily." Isabel felt a wave of gratitude and relief. "You would do that?" Vincent looked at her with an intensity that made her realize for the first time that his feelings for her might be deeper than just good Samaritan kindness. "I would. I will protect you and the children." That night, Vincent set up a vigil in the barn, sitting with an unlit lantern, a large hammer in his hands, eyes and ears attentive to any unusual sound. Isabel barely slept, lying with the children in the room, kitchen knife under the pillow, listening to every creak of the house. Nothing happened that night, nor the next, but the tension was constant, unbearable. On the 3rd day, as promised, Augustus returned. This time he wasn't alone. He brought 2 more men with him, big, nasty-looking types, who stayed waiting at the edge of the clearing while Augustus approached the house. Isabel went out to meet him, Vincent appearing beside her coming from the barn where he was working. Augustus looked at Vincent with obvious displeasure. "You hired protection?" he asked, with a tone of mockery. Vincent took a step forward, placing himself partially in front of Isabel. "I am her friend, and I am here to make sure no threats are made." Augustus smiled without humor. "There are no threats, just business. What is your answer, Mrs. Carter? Will you accept Mr. Tate's offer?" "No," said Isabel with a trembling but determined voice. "I won't sell. Tell your boss the property is not for sale for any price." Augustus's expression hardened. "Mr. Tate won't be happy." "Let him stay unhappy then," replied Vincent. "Now leave. This is private property, and you weren't invited." Augustus looked from Vincent to Isabel, then to the two men he brought. For a moment, Isabel thought they were going to try something violent right there, but Augustus just spat on the ground and signaled the men. "Let's go." He looked at Isabel one last time. "You will regret this decision." They went down the trail, disappearing amongst the trees. "This isn't over," said Vincent with a somber voice. "Tate will escalate. Next time it won't be a purchase proposal. It will be an attempt to take by force." Isabel hugged herself, feeling cold despite the heat of the day. "What are we going to do?" Vincent thought for a moment. "I'll sleep here from now on, in the barn. I'll keep watch every night. And during the day, I'll bring tools to make some security improvements. Better locks on the doors, seal gaps in the walls, maybe even make some kind of simple alarm with cans and string." Isabel agreed, grateful but also feeling enormous guilt. "You are doing so much for me. I don't know how to thank you." Vincent looked at her with that intensity again. "No need to thank me. I'm doing it because—" He hesitated, then continued with a lower voice. "Because I care about you and the children. Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel I have a purpose again. Because protecting you makes my life have meaning." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Isabel felt something move in her chest, something she hadn't felt since before John died. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning. Possibility, hope, connection. But there was no time to explore these feelings. They needed to prepare for what was coming. The following days were of increasing tension. Vincent fortified the house as he could, installed better latches on the doors, fixed all the windows so they closed securely, created a simple alarm system with tin cans hanging on string around the perimeter of the property that would make noise if someone bumped them while approaching. At night he slept, or pretended to sleep, in the barn with heavy tools within reach. During the day he worked near the house, never leaving Isabel and the children alone for long. Michael and Claire knew something was wrong. Isabel tried to hide the fear, but children always sense it. They got quieter, more clingy to their mother, looking nervously at the woods whenever they heard a strange noise. On the night of April 20th, 12 days after Augustus's first visit, the attack finally came. Isabel was lying with the children, pretending to sleep but totally alert, when she heard the first noise, cans rattling on the alarm system Vincent had set up. Her heart raced. Vincent, who was in the barn, heard it too. She saw the light of his lantern turn on through the cracks in the wall. Then low voices, men trying to be discreet, but not completely succeeding. Isabel got up silently, took the knife, went to the window. Through the crack in the shutter, she managed to see by the faint light of the waning moon 4 figures approaching the house, coming from different directions, surrounding the property. Vincent came out of the barn with a lantern in his left hand and a large hammer in his right. "This is private property," he shouted with a firm voice that echoed in the night. "Leave here now, or I will call the authorities." One of the figures gave a harsh laugh. "Authorities? We are miles from the village, carpenter. No one will hear anything here." Isabel recognized the voice. Augustus. And with him were the same 2 men from before, plus a 4th she didn't know. "What do you want?" asked Vincent, keeping distance but a defensive posture. Augustus took a step closer, entering the circle of lantern light. "We want to talk to the lady of the house. The boss is losing patience. Last chance to sell for a good price. If she doesn't accept this time, we'll have to take other measures." Isabel couldn't stand hiding. She opened the door and came out, knife hidden in the folds of her skirt. "I already said I won't sell. This is my house." "You have no right to be here." Augustus looked at her with an expression that mixed contempt and something that could be described as condescending pity. "Ma'am, we know you found something of value here. Gold, probably. No use denying. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." One of the other men, a big type with a nasty face, took a threatening step towards Isabel. Vincent moved immediately, placing himself between them. "Nobody touches her." The big man smiled, showing missing teeth. "And who's going to stop us? You alone against 4? The tension was about to explode into violence when a different voice cut through the night. 5 against 4, actually. Everyone turned. From the trail leading to the village, a figure emerged from the shadows. Isabel recognized with surprise and relief Father Anthony. The old priest was coming up the trail with his own lantern, and he wasn't alone. Behind him came 3 more men from the village, honest workers Isabel recognized from the market. The father stopped at the edge of the clearing, looking with obvious disapproval at Augustus and the henchman. "I came to check on Mrs. Isabel's well-being," he said, with a calm but firm voice. "I was informed there might be trouble here tonight. I see I wasn't misled." Augustus seemed less confident now with witnesses present. "Father, this isn't church business. It's a private matter between Mr. Tate and this woman." "It is church business when it involves intimidation of a widow and orphans," replied Father Anthony with a harder voice now. "And it is the business of the whole community when armed men invade someone else's property at night. I strongly suggest you return to the village before I am forced to make a formal complaint to the county sheriff." There was a moment of tension where it seemed Augustus would consider forcing a confrontation anyway. But with 7 men against 4 and a priest as a witness, the odds weren't in his favor. "This isn't over," he said finally with a low and threatening voice. "Mr. Tate doesn't give up easy." He signaled the other men, and they began to descend the trail back to the village, disappearing amongst the trees. When they were far enough away, Isabel felt her legs go weak. Vincent held her by the arm, preventing her from falling. Father Anthony approached with a worried expression. "Are you all right, my daughter?" Isabel nodded, trembling. "How did you know they would come tonight?" "Mrs. Higgins sought me out yesterday," explained the father. "She heard gossip at the market that Tate was planning something. Thought it best to come verify. Brought some good men with me, people who don't approve of Tate's methods." Isabel was too moved to speak. Vincent shook his hand. "Thank you, Father. You saved the situation." Father Anthony looked from Vincent to Isabel with a thoughtful expression. "Saved tonight. But the problem isn't solved. Tate is a powerful and stubborn man. He will try again, perhaps in worse ways. You need a permanent solution, not just temporary protection." Isabel knew he was right. She couldn't live like this, in a constant state of siege, waiting for the next attack. She needed to solve the problem once and for all, and for that she needed to make a decision about the gold and the documents. "Father, there is something I need to show you," she said, after a moment of hesitation. "Something important I discovered on this property, something that can change everything." That night, for the first time, more people went down into the tunnels. Isabel, Vincent, and Father Anthony, while the other village men stayed guarding the children and watching the property. When the father saw the markings on the walls, when he read the registry book of the freed by lantern light, when he understood the historic magnitude of what was there, tears ran down his wrinkled face. "This is a treasure greater than all the gold in the world," he said with a choked voice. It is proof that there was goodness amidst cruelty, hope amidst despair, ordinary people doing extraordinarily courageous things. This needs to be preserved, needs to be known. "But the gold, Father?" asked Isabel. "What should I do with it? Roderick Tate will only stop if I give him what he wants, or if I have nothing left to give." Father Anthony thought for a long time, turning the pages of the book with reverence. Finally, he looked at Isabel with an expression that combined wisdom and compassion. "My daughter, this gold was gathered by people who believed in freedom and justice. It was kept here with a purpose. Perhaps the purpose is exactly this moment, this decision. You can use it in a way that honors their memory and at the same time protects your family. They are not opposing things." "How?" asked Isabel, desperately wanting to believe it was possible. Vincent was the one who answered. "Making it public. If everyone knows about the discovery, if it becomes an official matter, Tate can no longer threaten to take the gold. And if you allocate the gold to some public cause, a cause that benefits the community, he won't have a legal argument to contest it." The father nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly, and I know exactly what cause would be perfect. The village needs a school for poor children, children of laborers, of widows. Until now we have none. The children grow up without education, without a chance at a better life. If you used part of this gold to build and maintain a school, you would be honoring directly the legacy of the people who created this root of freedom." Isabel felt something light up in her chest. A school, education for children like Michael and Claire, a better future for the next generation. It would be perfect. It would be exactly what the people in the book would have wanted. "But will it be enough to stop Roderick Tate?" "It will if we make an official public announcement," said the father. "Tomorrow, during Sunday Mass, I will tell the story of the discovery to the whole congregation. I will announce that Mrs. Isabel Carter, in an act of extraordinary generosity, is donating part of the historic discovery for the construction of a school for needy children. I will also announce that the historic documents will be preserved by the church as community heritage. With the whole village knowing, with everything being official and public, Tate will have no way to steal or threaten. It would be a public scandal." "And the part of the gold left over?" asked Vincent practically. "Because a school will need construction and maintenance, but not all the gold that's there. There will be leftovers." What is left over," said the father, looking at Isabel, "is yours by right. You bought this property legally. What was here belongs to you. Use it to care for your children. No one can criticize a mother for providing for her family, especially after donating so much for the common good." Isabel felt tears burn in her eyes. It was the perfect solution. She could honor the legacy of the liberators, help the community, protect her children, and still ensure financial security. She could do it all. "Let's do this," she said with a firm voice despite the tears. "Let's announce it tomorrow." The Sunday Mass of April 21st, 1851, would be remembered for decades in the village of Blackwood Creek. The small church was packed like never before, because news had spread during the night that Father Anthony would make an important announcement. Isabel was sitting on the wooden pew with Michael and Claire on each side, Vincent discreetly behind her. She could feel curious glances, whispers, speculation. Roderick Tate was also present, sitting in the front row as always, dressed in expensive clothes, an expression of confident ownership on his fat face. He didn't know what was coming. After the gospel reading, Father Anthony went up to the pulpit. "Brothers and sisters," he began with a voice carrying the weight of moral authority, "today I am going to tell you an extraordinary story of courage, faith, and redemption that happened right here, on our own land." He told everything. Told about the tunnels under the cabin on Lost Man's Ridge, told about the secret abolitionist network that operated there for over 30 years, saving hundreds of fugitive slaves. Told about the registry book, about the names, about the stories of suffering and hope, told about the gold that was left there as testimony. The congregation listened in absolute silence, completely mesmerized. Many people wept openly. Some recognized names of ancestors mentioned in the book, discovering for the first time that their own families had a connection to that story of courage. "And now," continued the father, "I need to honor the extraordinary generosity of one of our sisters, Mrs. Isabel Carter, who discovered this historic treasure on her property, made a decision that demonstrates true character and faith." He looked directly at Isabel. She decided to donate a significant part of the gold found for the construction of a free school for needy children of our village. A school where children of laborers, of widows, can learn to read, write, calculate. A school that will give them a chance at a better future. The congregation exploded in exclamations of surprise and approval. People turned to look at Isabel with expressions of respect and gratitude. The father needed to raise his hands to ask for silence. "Furthermore," he continued, "the historic documents of this abolitionist network will be preserved here in the church, where anyone can come to see, where the memory of these anonymous heroes will be kept alive forever." Isabel looked at Roderick Tate. His face was red with contained rage. He had lost. With the public announcement, with the whole village knowing, with the church officially involved, he had no way to claim the gold or threaten Isabel. Any attempt now would be a public scandal, would be attacking a respected institution, would be going against the express will of the entire community. Roderick stood up abruptly and left the church before the end of the Mass, slamming the door hard. No one missed him. After the Mass, people surrounded Isabel. Mrs. Higgins hugged her, crying, saying she was proud. Mothers of poor children thanked her with choked voices, saying now their children would have a chance they never had. Men of the village offered volunteer work to build the school. The clerk Sebastian Lowe, who had sold the property to Isabel, shook her hand, saying she had made the right choice, that fate was right to put her in that place. Vincent remained discreetly by her side through everything, a solid and comforting presence. When they finally were alone on the path back to the cabin, he spoke. "You did something extraordinary today. Changed the fate of many children. Honored people who died decades ago without knowing they would be remembered." Isabel looked at him, at this man who had appeared in her life as a carpenter but had become so much more. "I wouldn't have managed without you. Without your help, your protection, your advice." Vincent stopped in the middle of the path, turned to face her fully. "Isabel, in the last months, since I came to fix the roof of this house, my life changed completely. I was dead inside, just existing. But protecting you and the children, being part of this discovery, of this story, made me feel alive again, made me feel I have a purpose." He hesitated, then continued with a lower voice. "Made me feel that maybe I don't need to stay alone forever." Isabel felt her heart accelerate. She knew what he was saying without saying it directly, and she discovered she felt the same. John had been dead 6 months. The grief was still recent, but life continued, and Vincent had shown himself to be a man of honor, of courage, of genuine kindness. Michael and Claire already loved him, and she could love him too, given time. "I don't want to stay alone forever either," she said softly, "but I need time. I am still grieving, still healing." Vincent nodded with understanding. "I have all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere." If this story is touching your heart, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and share with who you love. The following months were a visible transformation. With part of Isabel's gold added to additional donations from wealthier families of the village who didn't want to be left behind in public generosity, construction of the school began in June. Vincent led the carpentry project. Other men helped with the masonry, Women campaigned to get books and materials. The Liberty School, as it was called in honor of the liberators of the abolitionist network, was inaugurated in September of 1851. It was a simple but solid building with 2 large rooms, many windows for natural light, blackboards on the walls, wooden benches for the children. On Inauguration Day, 43 children enrolled, including Michael and Claire. Father Anthony hired a young teacher from Richmond, an educated woman named Beatrice, who accepted coming to the small village because she believed in the mission. Classes began immediately, and for the first time in the history of the village, poor children learned to read. The historic documents were installed in a special display case in the church sacristy. Father Anthony gave regular tours, explaining the history of the abolitionist network, reading excerpts from the registry book. People came from neighboring villages to learn about this hidden chapter of local history. Descendants of freed slaves came in emotional pilgrimage to see the names of their ancestors written with respect and reverence. As for Isabel, she used the portion of gold she kept to completely transform the cabin. She hired workers to do proper renovations, turning the decaying structure into a comfortable and welcoming home. The roof was completely redone, walls reinforced and painted, new windows installed, rooms furnished properly. She bought a milk cow, chickens, started a large vegetable garden. The property that had been a place of fear became a true home, and the legend of the haunting disappeared like mist in the sun. When people knew the truth about the tunnels, about the optical phenomenon of the quartz crystals, about the real story behind the mystery, the fear evaporated. Some families even asked to visit the tunnels. Isabel allowed occasional guided tours, always with Vincent along to ensure safety. Roderick Tate tried to create problems a few times in the following months, questioned the legality of the discovery, tried to argue the gold should go to the state, but Father Anthony had documented everything carefully, had the support of the local judge, who wasn't in Tate's pocket as Roderick thought, and public opinion was totally against any attempt to take anything from Isabel or the school. Eventually, Roderick gave up. His reputation in the village never completely recovered. People remembered he had tried to intimidate a widow and steal a discovery that would benefit poor children. His business suffered. Some families stopped buying at his store. It wasn't ruin, but it was a lesson. Augustus, Roderick's main henchman, surprisingly came to seek Isabel 3 months after the incident. He apologized in a clumsy but apparently sincere way, saying he had just followed orders but didn't feel right about what he had done. Isabel, with a heart bigger than the grudge, accepted the apology. Augustus eventually left Roderick's employment and started working as a helper in the school construction, trying to do something good to compensate. Time passed. Winter of 1852 arrived and went. Spring bloomed again. And on a September morning of that year, exactly 1 year after the school inauguration, Isabel Carter and Vincent Moore married in a simple ceremony at the village church. Isabel wore a new dress, not black mourning but soft blue, wildflowers in her brown hair. Vincent was nervous and happy at the same time, holding her hand with care as if it were a precious thing that could break. Michael was ring-bearer, carrying the rings with enormous pride. Claire was flower girl, throwing petals and smiling in a way Isabel hadn't seen since before John's death. Mrs. Higgins cried through the entire ceremony, saying to anyone who would listen that she always knew those two would end up together. Father Anthony officiated with his own tears in his eyes, happy to see 2 lonely souls finding company in each other. After the wedding, Vincent moved into the cabin on Lost Man's Ridge, which was no longer called the Haunted Cabin, but just Isabel's house. He set up a carpentry workshop in the barn, after the entrance to the tunnels was permanently sealed with stone and mortar for safety, and his business prospered. People came from afar to buy furniture made by him, known for the quality and the story of the man who made them. Isabel continued taking care of the house, the garden, the animals. But she also involved herself deeply with the school, visited regularly, helped teacher Beatrice with the younger children, organized fundraising events, became an informal member of the council that administered the school. Michael grew up loving studies, showing particular talent for mathematics. Teacher Beatrice said he had potential to go to university eventually, something that would have been an impossible dream before the school existed. Claire flourished too, losing the extreme shyness, making friends, drawing constantly. Vincent made special paper for her with pressed wood scraps. And in March of 1853, almost exactly 2 years after Isabel had first arrived at the abandoned cabin terrified, she gave birth to a daughter, a healthy girl with dark eyes and strong lungs, who screamed her arrival to the world with indignation. Vincent wept holding the baby, experiencing for the first time the joy of fatherhood that had been ripped from him years before. Isabel, exhausted but radiant, suggested the name, Hope. Hope grew surrounded by love, with 2 older siblings who adored her, a father who carried her everywhere, a mother who soothed her with songs, grew in a house that had been a place of fear but became a place of peace, grew in a community that remembered its history, that honored the past while building a better future. 5 years later, in 1856, when Hope was 3, Michael 12, and about to go to secondary school in a bigger city with a special scholarship, Claire 9 and already drawing portraits people paid to have, Isabel was pregnant again. This time it would be a boy, whom they would call Anthony in honor of the father who had helped so much. On a hot afternoon that summer, Isabel was sitting on the porch of the house, hands resting on her rounded belly, looking at the trail leading to the village. The trail she had climbed for the first time 5 years ago, with a heart full of fear and despair, not knowing if she would survive, not imagining what she would find. Vincent came out of the workshop covered in sawdust, wiping his hands on a cloth. He saw Isabel sitting there with a thoughtful expression and sat beside her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, placing a large, calloused hand over hers. Isabel looked at him, at the man who had been her salvation in so many ways. "I was thinking about how strange life is. 5 years ago I was lost, without hope, without a future. I bought this place because I had no choice, because I was desperate, and I thought I had made a terrible mistake, that I had condemned my children to live in a cursed place." And discovered it wasn't a curse," said Vincent softly. "It was a blessing in disguise." Isabel nodded. "I discovered that sometimes the places nobody wants are exactly the places we need to be. That sometimes what seems like an end is actually a beginning. That from fear courage can be born, from despair hope can be born, from darkness light can be born." She looked at the woods around the property, at the trees that had seemed so threatening that first night, but were now just beautiful trees. Looked at the place where she had seen the luminous procession during the storm, the vision that had terrified her, but ended up leading to the discovery that changed everything. Those people who created the abolitionist network, who hid fugitive slaves in these tunnels, who kept that gold, continued Isabel, they will never know their legacy continues, that the gold they saved is educating children decades later, that the names they wrote are being remembered with honor, that their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Vincent squeezed her hand. They know. Somehow, wherever they are, they know, and they are at peace. Michael ran out of the house at that moment, shouting he had finished his math homework and Vincent had promised to teach him how to make dovetail joints. Claire appeared right behind, asking her father to see the new drawing she had done of a butterfly. Hope ran after her siblings, tripping on her own short legs, laughing. Vincent stood up to attend to the children, but stopped before and looked back at Isabel. "You saved this family," he said. "You had the courage to face the impossible, had the strength to make difficult decisions, had the wisdom to honor the past while building the future. You are stronger than you ever imagined being." Isabel felt tears of happiness burn in her eyes. "I didn't do it alone. I had help. I had you." Vincent smiled, that rare and precious smile that transformed his serious face. "And you will have forever." He went to take care of the children, leaving Isabel alone with her thoughts for one more moment. She looked once more at the house that had been abandonment, but was now home, at the land that had been cursed, but was now blessed, at the life that had been despair, but was now fullness, and she thought of the words Father Anthony had said at her wedding. "Sometimes God takes us to dark places not to punish us, but to show us stars that are only visible in the darkness. Sometimes what looks like a curse is actually the greatest blessing, just disguised in a way only the brave can recognize." Isabel had been brave without knowing she was being. She had faced fear, had entered darkness, had looked for the stars. And she had found more than she ever dreamed possible. Not just gold and historic discovery, but family, purpose, love, peace. Years later, when Isabel was already an elderly lady with completely white hair, when Michael was a respected professor in the capital, when Claire was a known artist, when Hope managed the school that had been built with the gold her mother found, when Anthony was a carpenter like his father and maintained the family tradition, people still told the story. They told about the widow who bought the cabin nobody wanted, about the stormy night when she saw something no human being should forget, about the hidden tunnels and the secret of courage they held, about the choice she made to transform personal discovery into community benefit, about how a place of fear became a symbol of hope. And when children asked if the story was true, if the restless souls were real, if the gold really existed, the elders answered, "The souls weren't ghosts, they were reflections of light, but they were real in a deeper way. They were memories of real people who fought for freedom, who sacrificed everything for what they believed. The gold was real, but the true treasure was never the metal. It was the courage, it was the kindness. It was the human capacity to transform suffering into redemption, fear into strength, darkness into light. And always, always the story ended the same way. If you are lost, if you have no hope, if the place where you are seems cursed, remember Isabel. Remember that the places nobody wants are sometimes exactly the places that hold the greatest treasures. Not treasures of gold, but treasures of purpose, of transformation, of becoming who you were born to be. Remember that no matter how dark the night, how scary the storm, how impossible the situation seems, there is always light waiting to be found. Sometimes in the depths of the earth, sometimes in the heart of strangers who become family, sometimes inside yourself, courage you didn't know you possessed. Isabel Carter, who later became Isabel Moore, lived until 82 years old. She died peacefully in her sleep in 1891, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren in the house that had been her salvation. On the tombstone, by her request, was written only, "She bought the cabin nobody wanted and found everything she needed." The Liberty School still exists today, more than a century and a half later, now modernized, but still bearing the same name, still educating children, still honoring the memory of the anonymous liberators who risked everything for justice. And on stormy nights, when lightning illuminates the sky over Lost Man's Ridge, if you look at the right angle, you can still see reflections of light dancing amongst the trees. They aren't ghosts, but they are a reminder that from fear, courage can be born, from despair, hope can be born, and that no night, however dark, lasts forever. Always, always the dawn comes.